Thank you, choir. Choir's got us launched into the season of Lent. And we're launching in with a pretty important story. Have you heard the story of the feeding of the 5,000 people before? Have you heard it? It wouldn't be surprising if you have heard that story before. It's crossed into popular culture, and the Gospels love this story. I got a handy chart here. The Gospels tell the story of the feeding of the 5,000 over and over again. Many times we'll be studying stories from the Gospel of John that only John tells. John is a kind of a standalone gospel, separate from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But take a look here. Do I have my little chart, my handy chart? Matthew tells the story. Mark tells the story. Luke tells the story. And as we heard today, John 6 tells the story. And Matthew and Mark love the story of Jesus feeding a big mass of people so much they tell another version of the story where Jesus feeds 4,000 people. So all told, in the Gospels, Jesus feeds 5,000 or 4,000 people 6 times. The Gospels are cuckoo for Jesus feeding hungry people. You know, it's really remarkable. The story of resurrection is only told 4 times. The story of Jesus feeding a mass of people miraculously with very little starting foods 6 times. It's interesting when I looked at the feeding of the 5,000 stories in Matthew, Mark, and Luke to kind of compare it to John. I expected the stories to diverge from each other, kind of like Easter stories do. I was surprised to see how all 4 accounts of the feeding kind of follow the same recipe, you might say. There's Jesus, there's disciples, there's a crowd. The crowd is hungry, and there's a question of what to do, how you're going to feed the crowd or not feed the crowd. And all of the stories feature 5 loaves of bread. And I think John adds the detail that they're barley loaves. And 2, and the fish weren't the size of a room, okay? Nor the breads. You know, the gospel does not say the loaf of bread was as big as a whale. No. 5 loaves and 2 fish. So a small quantity, a large number of people, all 4 gospel accounts. And then, you know, Jesus blesses it, kind of a communion-like act takes place. The people all sit down. That's a feature of all of them. And then there's this distribution, and then all eat, all satisfied. And there were, your favorite thing to eat in the fridge, there were leftovers. So all 4 accounts are kind of in lockstep with these elements. So I looked at a couple parts of the story that were unique to John. First thing, and John Tualeke noticed this at our Wednesday gathering. At the beginning of the story, Jesus is looking out. He's kind of anticipating. He sees the hordes coming. So Jesus is looking out, and he's doing some calculations. Then it is Jesus who says to the disciples, "So, how would you feed 5,000 people?" In the other accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, the disciples preemptively see the crowds are there, and the disciples see it, and they kind of are acting like Jesus' manager, saying, "Hey, you know, time to send them off. They need to go to the village. They need to hunt and gather. They need to do their own thing." And Jesus, in the other gospel, says, "Wait a minute. You do it." But in John, Jesus sees it coming, and he pivots, he turns to his disciples, and then it uses a very interesting phrase. Jesus asks the question, how would you feed, or where are you going to get bread to feed these people? He asks, where are you going to buy this? And he says it to test them. To test them. You guys like tests? No. I was kind of intrigued by that word test this week. Number one, I don't like tests. You don't like tests. But I thought it's what a teacher does, administer tests. And our theme is teach us your ways. So here it is, our theme, teach us your ways. Jesus asks, how are you going to feed all these people? He said it in order to test his disciples because he already knew what he was going to do. So he tests them before he can be managed by their anxiety and their plan, which, in the other Gospels, the disciples probably had a more practical idea of what to do. So he's testing them. So Philip says, well, 6 months' wages wouldn't cover this one. Not happening. There's not enough money to pay for this. DoorDash, whatever. So a little, resource deprived there. And then Andrew, when he is offered this test, says, there is a boy here. This boy has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. It is a boy. I think that's really an interesting divergence that John takes compared to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's as though Jesus and his disciples have a little cooler, a little picnic basket with food. This is what's in our storage. Should we share it or not? And in John's, they don't have the food. It's a kid. Isn't that marvelous? Only the kid is in the Gospel of John. And the kid has food. And Andrew sees the kid and sees the food. But then the next thing Andrew does is erase the whole thought. But what is that? That is a nothing burger in this situation. And then John's story kind of follows the other Gospels. Jesus is like, have them sit down. Jesus takes the food. It's kind of a communion-like giving thanks. There's the distribution. All eat. All are satisfied. Remember that word if you were here Wednesday night? Satisfied. And there were leftovers. So zeroing in on John's witness to this story told about 6 times in the Gospels, Jesus, the teacher, administers a test. As we travel across Lent with our Teach Us Your Ways theme, number 1, I don't want you to have test anxiety about Jesus. Sometimes when we use the word teach, it can sound so cruel. Well, I'll teach you. That's not Jesus's way. One secret identity I have used for God or Jesus is gracious teacher. He is our gracious teacher. So when you see test, do not be afraid. Think this is an opportunity to learn from Jesus. I asked Wednesday night, what would you like to learn from Jesus? If our phrase, if our study, if our theme song is, teach us your ways, what would you like to learn? I'll throw that out there right now. What would you like to learn from Jesus? First of all, do you have things to learn from Jesus, or have you got it conquered? Do you have things to learn? How many people think, I got something to learn from Jesus? I got something to learn. Do you want to throw it out there? Peace. What would you like to learn from Jesus, Madeline? So many things. What else would you like to learn from Jesus today? Patience. Love your enemy. Oof, that's a tough curriculum piece. To forgive. Anything else? What would you like to learn from Jesus? Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Help us learn from you. This week I was learning from a podcast about how humans learn. And the researcher was Marian Iacoboni. He is a professor at UCLA, and he studies the brain. And in the study of brain science, he has identified a part of our brain and how it learns. So I think his book called Mirroring People has been out for quite a while, but this podcast where I heard him interviewed was new in the last couple of weeks. So there's a part of our brain that has cells that are called mirroring cells that we're born with, and these mirroring cells help us learn, help us look out beyond ourselves and imagine other people and their feelings, and we mirror what's around us. It's one big thing about how we learn. And what these cells show us is that we learn empathy. We learn to love other people. We learn to understand what other people are thinking. And we can mirror that. We can acclimate to somebody else. It's how we grow, how we learn, how we change, all across our lives. Sometimes these cells, this capacity, can be used for ill. We could acclimate to not great teaching, not great following. That is true. But these cells, which we have all our lives long, can also acclimate to learn kindness. We have the capacity to learn kindness, all of us. Of course, it helps if we have someone to mirror and copy. And in the season of Lent, we're really going to root ourselves in Jesus Christ, asking him to teach us your ways. And perhaps we can mirror him, knowing that we have the capacity to do this. Science tells us this. And so does the Gospel of John. Jesus tested his people. Learning is not going to be pain or challenge free, but it is the path through Jesus Christ that we save civilization. This is the way of love. And we'll talk more about that. There's more curriculum to come. But John's witness to the feeding is a witness of Jesus saying, you know what, followers, I know you can learn. I know you have the capacity to do things. And John's witness underscores what Andrew was doing. Andrew looked around. He could see a kid. And in that society, it was very easy to dismiss a kid. Andrew saw the kid. Andrew saw possibility. His gray matter saw something that maybe was shimmering a little bit about what might help solve the problem. But then he tried to erase it and say, oh, but what's that? That's nothing. And John, the gospel writer, hopes we realize not so fast. Don't shut down possibility. There is a foothold of hope. So maybe that's our learning. How do you feed 5,000 people? Look for that shimmer. Look for that little bit of provision. And if you're in a group that's trying to shut it down or be negative, not so fast. Not so fast. And if this little bit of provision comes from an unlikely place, Don't ignore it. This season of Lent, let's learn to see where provision, where helpfulness is, and value it with other people. And through that, maybe, we see kids, we see other people, we see people on the fringe, and we have this thing called empathy, this muscle we can develop and say, I bet they want to help. And that's where we grow. That's our recipe. And we'll be learning new recipes across the season. But today, let's enjoy the beautiful taste of empathy. To God be the glory. Amen.